Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, our politics panel on ridings, representation, and where Pierre Poilievre might run next. But first, weighing the outcome.
People will say, what does this mean to the Canada's trade relationship with China? From an agricultural perspective, this gets us back to where we were.
Saskatchewan's Premier freshly home after joining the Prime Minister's trade mission to China, landing lower tariffs on canola and other agricultural commodities in exchange for concessions on Chinese electric vehicles. News Hour Premier also welcomed, posting in the wake of the deal, trade tariffs are harmful and only serve to raise consumer prices, limit choice and innovation, and damage businesses and producers. Rick Christians also took part in the Canadian delegation and the CEO of Invest Alberta joins us now. Rick, welcome to Alberta Primetime.
Michael, great to talk to you.
All right. So you were on the ground. So in weighing the success of the trade mission, how far do you see this outcome going to charting a new economic path forward for Canada beyond reliance on the U.S. market?
Absolutely, and I think Premier Moe was absolutely correct in the early points that he was making, in that we want China to buy products from Alberta. Canola, obviously very important to us, but so are other agricultural products. And so it was good to get back and chart a path and work with our friends in China forward to make sure that we reestablish those relationships and continue to get investment from the Chinese. Most people in Alberta probably know that the Chinese invest largely in our economy, and in oil and gas, their investment is well over $60 billion, which represents almost 50% of all the money that China invests in Canada. So certainly an important trade investment partner for us.
Well, and that Alberta relationship is already existing as we understand it. But how big of a shift is this from a federal government perspective?
It is significant. You're absolutely right. My team has been on the ground in Alberta or in China for years. We have people located in both Hong Kong and in Beijing. The Alberta government has people on the street as well. And so we've been working very hard at maintaining and building relationships. But quite frankly, for the last number of years, we have been lone rangers in that market. Alberta has been present. Most other provinces have not. And the federal government, of course, had its issues. So it's been a challenging environment to operate in. And the Feds now coming on side is incredibly helpful.
Okay, so what role did you play in this delegation?
We sat in on some of the meetings, and we also made sure that a number of investors that we're currently working with who are planning to come to Alberta, and actually one of them will be in Alberta in the week of February 14th, we wanted to make sure that we had those clients in front of the Prime Minister. So normally you schedule 10, 15-minute meetings with them. It's more of a meet and greet. Most of our clients ended up spending 45 minutes or even longer with the Prime Minister to chat through what they're thinking about and how they're planning to move forward.
You obviously have an understanding of the marketplace there. So where does Alberta land on the radar of Chinese leadership? How much interest do they have in what is happening here?
They are the largest buyer of oil out of the new pipeline that opened last year, the Trans Mountain. And they want to buy more oil because the reality is they were buying oil from Venezuela. So number one, they see oil as really important for the growth of their economy, and they see us, Alberta, as one of the opportunities to move forward with. Secondly, in petrochemicals, they have always wanted to do more business with Alberta, produce more things here for their market back there. And so we've been working with them on that as well. Thirdly, agriculture. Canola is one product, but there are many other products that they want to buy from Canada. And with all of the uncertainty that currently resides in the world, especially the uncertainty being created by our friends down south, dealing with a reliable Alberta, which has predictable products, high quality, is something that they want to continue to build on and continue to work on.
Maybe on that uncertainty front, what degree of interest or concern was maybe raised by the Chinese over momentum building around the separatist movement here in Alberta and petition efforts for a referendum in that regard? Could that impact or influence investment movement?
You know what, Michael? That's a great question. I get asked that a lot, and it certainly is of interest in Alberta. There was a little bit of conversation about it in Europe when I was there last summer. There has been no conversation in Asia around the separation concerns at all. And when we do explain it to people and we kind of walk them through what's happening, how the referendum's going to work, what percentage of Albertans are thinking about separation, people are pretty comfortable with what we're explaining to them and how we're working it through.
Okay. As you mentioned, there's obviously interest in Alberta energy, Alberta oil. We know the Alberta and federal government signed the MOU in November. As yet, though, does not appear to be a company willing to step up to the pipeline plate. If it is that China is seriously interested in buying more Alberta oil, what then is the likelihood Chinese investment could be drawn into a new pipeline?
You know, that's a great project that Premier and her team are working very hard on. So I'm not going to get in the middle of those discussions, but I am going to say that the Chinese stand ready to participate in whatever format we would like them to. And so it's really up to us to decide the level of engagement that we want to move forward with, which I'm sure is something the provincial and the federal government are thinking about on a daily basis.
Okay, so outside the energy sector, what other areas of our economy, our Alberta economy, stand to potentially benefit from these talks?
Agriculture absolutely does. But I think we have to be smart, and Premier Mo and I were chatting a little bit about this, and that is that at the end of the day, it's good to be back in China, and it's good for our canola farmers to be able to sell their products into that market. But let's make sure that we also diversify and continue to develop other markets so that we don't run the risk of getting into this situation again when we're reliant on one particular country. Pork and beef, high on the list as well, and there's some movement on both of those fronts as we head into the next few months. We'll have to see how that plays out in terms of what actually gets put in, because it's a very complex file, but we see further opportunities for that. Pulses are very popular in India, and that's been our primary market for that. But there's also significant demand for that product in the Chinese marketplace, and we would love to sell more of that product in. So there's work being done around that.
All right, Rick, you mentioned early on about maybe a Chinese delegation coming here in February. So what are you looking for or anticipating now where Chinese investment in Alberta is concerned?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I'm really excited about. The team's been working so hard, but there's been no reason to really bring Chinese investors here. So individual investors have a schedule that we've created for them that starts February 14th, and we hope to make some initial announcements that are primarily around investment and private equity funds that are Chinese in nature, either from Hong Kong or the mainland, that want to start investing in Alberta, and we're going to hopefully welcome them. Then in rapid successions, we have some petrochemical companies coming into town. We have some agricultural companies coming, and we also have some people that are really intrigued by the Four Seasons Resort Act that the government passed late last year. It allows for additional development in provincial parks, hotels, destination resorts, and the Chinese are really good at developing those kind of resorts all over the world. So there's a high level of interest in that. So those four sections are probably where we're going to continue to focus, and we have been focused for a number of years.
All right, a lot on the go. Rick, we'll have to leave it there. Appreciate your time this evening. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure. Thanks for your time. Talk soon.
Rick Christians is the CEO of Invest Alberta. From Alberta's stake in Chinese trade developments to the impact the China deal could have on Team Canada dynamics and questions around where Pierre Poilievre might run next. Time now for tonight's politics panel, and joining us this evening, Chaldean Menda, newly retired political science faculty member at MacEwan University, and Don Hill, co-founder of the blog Beyond Polarity, longtime broadcast journalist in Alberta. Good evening to you both, and let's begin with what we heard from the CEO of Invest Alberta on his involvement in the Carney trade mission to China. Chaldean, how much of the dialogue around that mission has focused, obviously on tariffs and electric vehicle concessions, but what's your read on the degree to which our province actually factors into the bigger trade and investment outcome?
Michael, I think Alberta factors highly in the outcome of this trade mission. I think the Chinese are going to make room to import agricultural products, canola, beef, pork. So Alberta farmers are going to be winners. And Saskatchewan also is going to be a big winner. But clearly, this strategic partnership of Mr. Carney with China is going to open export opportunities for our agricultural producers. But it's also going to cause strain in other parts of Canada, because in Ontario, the premier there is not very happy of the impact of the EVs on auto workers.
Don, we're obviously picking up on some of this conversation, but surprised that there isn't more dialogue around how Alberta stands to fare in the wake of this federal trade mission.
Well, this opens up, listening to the conversation prior to our conversation, a whole bunch of doors that haven't been opened up in decades. I want to harken back to do a bit of a history lesson in the lead up to the Free Trade Association we have with the United States of America. And that was at the time we have Mr. Mulroney, Brian Mulroney, and John Turner, who was the leader of the Liberal Party at that time. And it's a famous exchange between the two in the lead up to an election and about free trade. And that was Mr. Turner was warning exactly what we just heard a few moments ago. When you marry your supplier, as it was with the United States, well, things might go south pretty fast if you're not too careful, and here we are. So Mr. Turner's ideas and what he was warning about, now here we are. Mr. Mulroney, meantime, had something to say for prime ministers that followed him. Now, Mr. Mulroney is gone, but he said the prime minister's #1 job was to maintain national unity. Whoa, that's going to be interesting next week with Doug Ford being a little bit upset with Mr. Carney. And the second job, Mr. Mulroney said, that the Prime Minister had was maintaining a relationship, and a good relationship, with the United States of America. So that's coming up over the next little while. And in Alberta, we seem to be looking at a World Trade Association that's generally about the world.
Chaldeans, before we get to that unity element that Don just brought up, what do you think Albertans should really be watching for now, where Chinese investment in this province is concerned? How much do you think that pipeline is on the radar?
I think the concern that Albertans and generally also Canadians should watch out for is that Chinese are very sensitive on some topics, and they could easily pull the rug under us if we stray. So there has to be a bit of caution in terms of how we deal with the Chinese. But clearly, there are opportunities in the oil and gas sector for Chinese investment. A new pipeline to the West Coast, I think the Chinese are going to be very much interested in that. So there is an opening, and I hope that the Premier, working in concert with the federal government, will maybe travel again to China and see how we can build up kind of momentum on investment. But Michael, at the same time, we have to be cautious also not to damage our relationship with the United States. They are our #1 trader. They, $3 billion plus dollars cross the border every day. And therefore, we have to be careful to nurture that relationship as we also open strategically to other markets.
All right. While Alberta is looking to benefit from the trade mission to China, balance trade issues south of the border, reaction elsewhere could make for some interesting team dynamics.
Support companies that are building vehicles here. It's as simple as that. This is a Team Canada approach. We got to stick together.
Ontario's discontent over the Carney delegation making a deal that allows for up to 49,000 Chinese-made electric vehicles into Canada annually, a concession for China easing those tariffs on canola and other ag products. It's a conversation sure to come up with the PM when First Ministers meet in Ottawa next week. Don, how do you see Doug Ford's pushback playing in the wake of the China trade mission. Is there more here than just a premier expressing frustration over how his province might fare?
Well, he's got a terrible, terrible problem because ever since the early 1960s, when the first auto pact was put together with the United States, in the sense that we have what we now have, these free and easy exchange of parts and car parts and all the other stuff that goes. This has been going on, like I said, since the early 60s, and suddenly this is falling apart in almost like it seems like seconds. The second thing, I'm going to go sideways for just a second here, and let's not forget that the President of the United States said we don't need Canadian cars. So why would he say that in Michigan, of all places? Well, it turns out that in Michigan, there were a lot of voters that did not vote for the Republican Party, and they just also happened to be working in auto plants. So there's politics involved here, no doubt. About building electric EVs in Canada, well, again, Doug Ford had a terrible problem. They invested heavily in a battery plant. How did that go? So I don't know what's in play here, but all we know is that we can't go back to where we were because that's not where we are anymore. I'll leave it at that.
Well, and Charlene's at this stage, how important is unity around the Team Canada table? How uncomfortable a discussion do you anticipate it could well be 1 week from today?
Well, Michael, I think we have to avoid this kind of artificiality, trying to create a sense of unity when there are actually real concerns in certain provinces in terms of how we approach trade. I recall that when our Premier, Daniel Smith, was trying to cooperate and open up to the United States and Trump, he faced backlash from Mr. Ford, calling for a Team Canada approach. Now the shoe is on the other foot. He wants to protect auto workers in Ontario. But clearly, he needs to align himself with the team in terms of making sure that we have a cohesive approach to the U.S. challenge and also opening up new markets. So I'm hoping that you slow down some of his criticism, work with the other premiers and the federal government, and come up with a common approach that protects our auto workers. I think the federal government has to come up with some arrangement to help these workers. But I think he is to be on board on a Team Canada as we face this challenge from both the United States and China. These are the issues that Mr. Carney raised in his Davos speech.
All right. Time for us to take a bit of a break. When we come back, though, questions around where Pierre Poilievre might run next. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. There may be an added dimension to discussions when federal Conservatives gather in Calgary at the end of the month for Pierre Poilievre's leadership review. That is because of news reports the Conservative leader will not run in Battle River Crowfoot in the next election, the Alberta riding he won in last year's by-election after losing his own Ontario seat in April. Damien Kirk, the previous MP for Battle River Crowfoot, is now said to be the Conservatives' candidate whenever Canadians next go to the polls. Charlene, surprised Pierre Poilievre would not stick with running again in this Alberta riding?
Yeah, a bit of a surprise, Michael. But I think there are two forces at work here. The first is that the Carleton riding, where he ran for over a decade, he won the Carleton riding for 10 years, and he was defeated in the last election. It looks like things are changing in that particular riding. The federal workers in that riding are unhappy with the cutbacks by the Carney government. So maybe there's a bit of political movement, and he wants to maybe exploit it in the next election. So that is one possibility. Another possibility is that maybe he doesn't want to be identified too much with the separatist sentiment that we have in this province. The Battle River Crowfoot area is a strong, base for that kind of sentiment. And so he wants to win in Ontario, Quebec, and other places. I think he doesn't want to be too closely associated with that separatism. So perhaps maybe he's moving out now in the hope to not damage his image in the next election.
Don, where do you think this leaves constituents in Battle River Crowfoot? What's the risk of this maybe ruffling some feathers?
Well, I want to echo what Chaldeans was saying just a moment ago, is that it's wise for the leader of the royal opposition, the loyal opposition, to distance himself from a sovereignty movement, which seems to have gathering a lot of momentum in central Alberta. So that's wise in a way. And also, that's a safe riding that you could run just about anybody there. And Damien was a nice guy and moved aside with the idea that he'd come back in. But what this presents is a much bigger question that is the elephant in the room, if we could just put this. Do we really expect Mr. Poilievre to be the leader of the loyal opposition 2 weeks from now? Maybe he will be. Will he be leading a conservative force that is going to be equal to what Mr. Carney's been doing around the world? Lots of questions around that one. So in some cases, this might be moot in the sense of where he runs, because he may not be able to run as the leader, but certainly he might be able to run somewhere in the country. I think right now the Conservatives next week have to have that long, dark night of the soul and ask themselves some questions about what happened over the last year. The Liberal Party of Canada completely co-opted our platform and made it their own. So how do we move past that? One way past it might be what the Liberals did, was to get a new leader. And we'll find out what that is all about in the weeks to come.
Okay, so Chaldeans, how do you see this setting up for next week's CPC convention and, of course, the leadership review for Pierre Poilievre?
Michael, it is a critical convention for the leader. People will be watching the numbers when the votes are counted. The Ralph Klein threshold of 75% is a number to look out for. If Mr. Poilievre fails to get above 75%, it would be a signal that the party wants a change of leadership. And I think that his larger problem is that he has to break through to the broader population beyond his base. I think his approach hasn't been working. His kind of attack dog approach. So he needs a change of approach. If he wins it, and attempt to bring home voters that are not comfortable with his style, and that is going to be the major challenge. But I think next week is critical. He has to win, in my mind, 75% or above to have any sense of continue to rule, continue to be the leader of the party.
And Don, what message do you feel he needs to bring, Pierre Poilievre needs to bring to the podium, if it is that he is to continue on as leader?
Well, if I was in that position, I wouldn't wish that upon him, because he spent his whole career being who he is. And let's be very frank. He's very, very good at what he does in terms of the barking dog in the room. And I don't mean that to be mean. I'm just saying, is if there's something wrong here, folks, maybe you should check. Maybe there's a bad guy outside the door and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong, okay? But I don't know what he can do and what he can say at this point, but what he does need to do and say is to the members of his caucus that he is not going to let you cross the floor and become Liberals, because the Liberals now have the best Conservative Prime Minister in the country, in Mark Carney.
Well, and they're all returning to the House of Commons next week. Gentlemen, we're out of time. Have to leave it there. Great to see you both. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Nice to see you, Chaldeans.
Bye.
Now, here are a few responses to a recent story posted by CTV News, and it's about U.S. President Donald Trump walking back a threat to impose tariffs over Greenland, saying there is a framework for a new deal with NATO on Arctic security. Foyle says another crisis solved by Trump that he created himself, this time by accepting what has been offered all along. Celtic writes, Trump didn't make a deal. He was told to back off. Sandy thinks Trump is not backing down. He's playing poker. And Eddie writes, Trump took the offer of an off-ramp. He knew he was losing. Have your say. Email us anytime at comments@albertaprimetime.com. Coming up tomorrow, musician and rancher Corb Lund on resubmitting his petition that calls for a ban on all new coal exploration and mining on the eastern slopes. Corb Lund on Friday. Until then, have a great evening, everyone. From all of us at Alberta Primetime, thank you for watching, and join us again next time.